My name is Nick Schauman. I am the chief head shucker and partner of the local Oyster and True Chesapeake Oyster Company.
Can you tell us about your connection to the oyster industry?
My connection to the oyster industry. Being from Baltimore, I grew up eating oysters. I had my first oyster when I was about 2 years old at Lexington Market, a couple blocks up the road. I've been eating them ever since. We always used to get a bushel of oysters on special occasions, anniversaries, Thanksgiving, New Year's Eve, and it was just always like the highlight of the day. So started shucking oysters to kind of help pay the bills every once in a while, and it turned into a thing, and now they are my life. So oysters have taken me a long way.
How does your field relate to the oyster industry?
How does my field relate to the oyster industry? Duh! We're an oyster bar. Yeah, I mean, that's our thing. The local oyster and True Chesapeake. The local oyster, we specialize, well, we only serve farm-raised oysters. We all grew up eating wild oysters, and as most of us well know now, there aren't a whole lot of them left. So we do our part. We grow our oysters in southern Maryland, and part of the deal is to let people understand and know where their food's coming from. So, like when I started doing this about 10 years ago, people would say oysters, and that was it. And now the first thing everyone says is, where are these oysters from? And it's neat to tell them that we grow them ourselves, and it's good for the bay, it's good for the farm. It's a win-win.
What challenges do you face related to the oyster industry?
What challenges do we face? That's a tough one. I think the challenge is, back to what I said earlier, is to let people understand and know where their food's coming from, and why it's important to do what we do, as well as recycling shell. We work with the Oyster Recovery Partnership. When we were starting about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, something like that. I think there were 9 restaurants recycling shells, and now there's well over 400, and we're always kind of in the top 10, doing our part, planting seed back into the Chesapeake. Let's see, you've never heard anyone ask where does chicken come from? Everyone wants to know where their food's coming from now. So the challenge is creating awareness, and reminding everyone that they have to do their part to ensure that the Chesapeake Bay will be around for our grandchildren.
What do you think is the most important issue affecting the oyster industry?
Why are these questions so hard? I'm just an oyster shucker.
You can skip a question.
What was the question?
What do you think is the most important issue affecting the oyster industry?
Most important. Guide me. What are some of the issues?
So, like water quality, or sometimes for oyster farmers, it's like regulation, things along those lines, like the oyster industry as a whole. You could even talk about, how COVID has affected. I'm not trying to
No. That's when I read the questions. That was the first thing that came to mind. And yeah, deer in headlights with the camera thing. The most challenging.
What's the most important issue? But that could also be for the challenging.
The most challenging part of being, part of the oyster industry now is, navigating this time that we're in. We have 3 locations right now, and we've opened and closed each of them 3 times in the last year and a half, which has been a challenge. And the farm is still there. The oysters are still in the water. They're still growing, but the people aren't going out as much as they used to eat them. So I don't know if Chef mentioned up the road, we have an overabundance of giant oysters right now. So we're finding ways to cook them and serve as much as them as we can. But that's been an issue, is just, getting people back out into restaurants and eating oysters.
Is there anything that you want people to know about the seafood restaurant industry or shucking,
It's not easy. The restaurant industry is not easy at all. But if you bring a really quality product to the table, you really don't have to do much to it. I mean, the advantage of having our own oyster farm is that, we are actually a farm to table restaurant. Not many other places actually have their own farm. So quality and freshness obviously is a big deal for us. We never shuck an oyster that's more than 3 or 4 days old, just because we have the constant flow coming up from the farm. What else? I can't remember what else.
You've been doing a great job. Yeah, these answers are great.
I want to ask them, what's your favorite way to eat an oyster?
My favorite way to eat an oyster? I'm still looking at you. My favorite way to eat an oyster. I don't have a favorite way to eat an oyster. I am the oyster guy. So I love them raw. I love them steamed. I love them roasted. Stew, boy, a nice warm cup of oyster stew on a cloudy autumn day. It's like, just makes you feel so good. I'd say my favorite way to eat them is to steam them, just because I don't have to shuck them. I just put them in the pot and dip them in the butter and good to go. 100 oysters like that. So, buddy of mine has an ice cream shop. He actually made oyster ice cream. I don't recommend that.
I know some breweries make oyster beer.
Yep, we do. We have our own oyster beer. Did we not mention that at the restaurant? This is something we can talk about. So, hey, can you pour me a stout, please? So we make our own oyster stout. And a film crew just like you guys a couple years ago made a little documentary about the filming, about the making of our beer. And it actually won an Emmy about 3 months ago. So we are Emmy award-winning oyster stout makers and shuckers. Keon, do you mind pouring me a stout? Oh, he got it? Okay, cool. I got you. So, oyster stout. So, we had an idea a couple years ago, and we partnered up with our friends at Waverly Brewing, because I didn't know of anyone in the craft industry in Baltimore doing an oyster stout. So, we take our shells from our skinny dippers and true Chesapeake oysters, and they actually boil the wort, the beer, when they're making the beer. They'll boil the shell with the wort, and the calcium flecks off, and it adds like a really nice silky mouthfeel. And right towards the end of the boil, they'll pull out the shell and put in a bag of live oysters, just until they open up, just a little bit. And that will release the liquor and infuse the beer with just a little bit of brininess. So yeah, the local oyster stout. It's delicious. And I'm going to show you one in 1 minute because they take forever to pour because they're nitrogenated.